but I'll try.
Okay, please do for us the reading, Mr. Tapua. Welcome to our class. As usual, we continue reading this book, Defeating Dictators by Dr. George Aiti, and we're looking at the now control over key institutions today. So we'll read this, then we'll pause, then we'll discuss, then we'll move on like that as we usually do. So welcome to you all. Mr. Tapua, please go ahead.
Okay. Control over key institutions. To facilitate the dispensation of patronage and reduce any threat to his power, the despot usurps control over all key state institutions: the army, police, civil service, state media, parliament, judiciary, central bank, and educational system. Each of these must serve his dictates. To ensure this, he pegs these institutions with his own supporters or tribesmen. Those who remain must sing his praises in order to keep their jobs. Professionalism in these institutions is destroyed and replaced with sycophancy. The first order of business for any dictator is to grab control of the security forces, the military, police, and paramilitary. The tactical objective here is to secure the survival of his regime by neutralizing or crushing any potential threat. In much of the Middle East, aristocrats depend on the support of the army, the security forces, and the intelligence services. A despot may employ a whole range of tactics to secure their loyalty. First, upon ascending to power, he systematically purges the security forces of personnel whose loyalty is questionable and replaces them with officers of the dictator's ethnicity or religion. Second, he may buy the loyalty of officer corps with salary increases. The purchase of new weapons, large emoluments, cars, and other gifts. Saddam Hussein, in quotation marks, routinely doled out new cars, Rolex watches, and cash to senior generals, according to several general officers who acknowledged receiving such gifts, close quote. In Africa, in much of Africa, the security forces are privileged elite. Soldiers and policemen are often accountable to no one, not to politicians, not to the press, not to the public. They say they serve. They're clothed, comfortably housed, and well-fed at government expense. They're issued guns and bullets, which they often use to suppress the people. Paranoid do not often trust their own military. Because of their weak legitimacy and the narrow base of lieutenants with access to the spoils, the strongman must increasingly rely on threats and coercion for his survival. But he cannot trust the military. It could overthrow him. So he creates a special battalion and equips it with weapons that are far superior to those of the military. But even then, the loyalty of this special battalion may not be a certainty. So he creates an elite presidential guard with troops drawn from his own tribe or from a foreign country to secure, I'm lost. Okay, to ensure reliability. Let me read that again. So he creates an elite presidential guard with troops drawn from his own tribe or from a foreign country to ensure reliability. In this way, the strong man creates layers upon layers of security organs, to which not only the populace, but also each other. In this obsession with security, simple basic principles are routinely flouted. The basic function of the military and the police is to protect the territorial integrity of the nation, as well as the lives and safety of its citizens. But many of Africa's soldiers and policemen have completely abandoned their traditional functions and roam the continent like hyenas, inflicting injury on innocent, unarmed civilians and causing wanton carnage. We wish to inform you that tomorrow we will be killed with our families. Philip Gorevich writes, across much of Africa, a soldier's uniform and gun had long been regarded and are still seen as little more than a license to engage in banditry. As they grow increasingly insecure and paranoid, autocrats spend enormous sums on the military and security forces, consuming large chunks of their budget. In Africa alone, military expenditure exceeds 20 billion a year, resources that nearly equal the total amount Africa receives in aid from all sources, and that could be devoted to development. Ironically, all these expenditures on the military do not buy a despot an iota of security. In the end, despots are often hoisted by their own petard and are ousted by officers from their own security apparatus, as we shall see in chapter 5. The next key institution of which a despotic regime seizes control is the media. Most Westerners take their freedom of expression for granted and fail to realize the critical importance of free, independent media. As Joseph Stalin once remarked, control the media, including cinema, and you control the minds of the people. A despotic regime may seek to control the flow of information for a variety of reasons. One, to keep movements of top officials or army commanders or military exercise from being reported, especially if the regime perceives a threat to its survival. 2, to use the media as a tool for indoctrination to advance a certain political ideology, religion, or the personality cult of the leader. 3, to use the media as a propaganda mouthpiece of government, praising government policies and lambasting its critics. 4, to keep the people in the dark. The regime may not want embarrassing lapses in judgment, competence, or governance, such as a waste of state resources, graft, embezzlement, and corruption exposed, to keep the outside world in
Hello, Sister Tapua. Can you hear me? Hello? Sister Tapua?
know of the skulls of dissidents being crushed in his torture chamber, or of the women being raped. In prison, as occurred in Iran in June 2009, and in broad daylight in Guinea in September 2009. Number 6, to silence the opposition, dissidents, and critics of inane government policies. A despotic regime has at its disposal a whole battery of measures to control key state institutions, ranging from the mild to the cruel and barbaric.
Thank you. Sister Tapua, we'll stop there and
All right.
look at what you've read, because it's also heavy packed here. Unfortunately, I've not been able to get Sawindok speaking. Sawindok? Sawindok, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So
Greetings.
Greetings, Sawindok. How are you?
Yes, I'm good.
Hope you've been following what
Struggling.
Sister Tapua was reading.
Yeah, I was following.
Unfortunately, you're very few here, but that's not an issue for us. Learning does not take the number.
Yeah.
It only takes the teacher to be present and the content to be ready. So
Yeah.
for us, we have the content, and we can go ahead and share what you think about this. Sister Tapua, you've been reading these, and I know you've been having that personal touch with the text. What are you seeing from here? Sister Tapua?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, you've been reading these, and probably you have that first touch with the text. What are you seeing here? Is the person describing something that is very foreign, or that's what actually is going on?
It's absolutely what's going on in this part of the world where I'm at. Because I think, like a few African leaders, Uganda being one, the despot actually appoints their sons to be in the military, to be in charge. So, because they don't trust anyone. You get examples of leadership purging certain top officials in the military because they can't trust who they are and who they might be, or what the ideas they'll have. So there's a tradition of people dying of accidents, of poisoning, of all sorts of, it's just an unstable, unhealthy environment. And sometimes I wonder how these despots actually want to survive in a situation like this, where you're always looking over your shoulders. That's exactly where we are. That's exactly what people are living through in the African context. Loads of examples of this. It's a pity. It's a pity. But paging happens everywhere. Because, I mean, look at what Donald Trump is doing. Hiring Elon Musk to change things, working at influencing the judiciary and so on. So, absolutely on point, I say. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you. Sawindok, I think sometimes back we had a conversation and you say if you are to be in power, why don't you employ your lawyers to protect you? What do you think about this text? Sawindok?
Yes, Brother Pigeon. This text tell me that all the leaders in the world are despots. They are all dictators. Where doesn't it happen that military is not under the control of the leader, the president, so to say? Which president does not control the media in his country? Which president does not control the fiscus in his country? Which president does not appoint cronies especially? So the whole world is rotting of despots. Donald Trump doing it. George Bush has done it. The whole of Africa is doing it. Australia has been doing it. I don't know about Canada and England, but 90% of the world seems to be led by despots. Who doesn't agree? And how are you going to fight a world system, a system that has been adopted by the whole world? And no president in the world has ever accepted to go out of office just after the first term. All the leaders in the world want to go to the second term, even if they know they haven't produced or delivered to the expectation of the electorate. So they try all tricks in the books. So all leaders in the world are despots and we must accept and just move along. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I come in?
Has anybody been hearing me?
Yeah, please come in. Yeah, I've been hearing you, Sawindok. If you support, please come in.
Yes. I think what that means then is for one to be a leader,
Mr. Support, I can't hear you.
of being. But I think for me, what matters towards the interest of the people. Because we are acknowledging here that we have a system, particularly in the capitalist system, that favors one group over the other. And the struggle is with using resources for the benefit of all. And you definitely know that there is a core group where you can get them to comply. The fair distribution of resources is almost like doing it the Traore way. Take power and just go along with it. But there lies the problem. I am different.
No, thank you. I think when we talk about then all leaders in the world are despots, is that we confirm that all leaders in the world, their security are their children, their wives, or their relatives. Because as much as I know, I think there was a report on some few days that around 6 or 7 presidents in Africa whose chief of command are actually their kids. But now it extends beyond the family to even tribesmen. In Kenya, for example, President Ruto, the commander-in-chief is not a Kangi. He's actually a Kikuyu. Of course, he's trying to make them Kalenjin. President Uhuru Kenyatta, the commander-in-chief for him was not a Kikuyu, was a Maasai. And therefore, the chief of defense forces have also been changing. One thing is this element of this passage that says that the basic function of military and police is to protect the territorial integrity of the nation, as well as the lives and safety of its citizens. That's where I want to stress on. Then it goes by say that, but many African soldiers and policemen have completely abandoned their traditional functions around the continent, like Guyana, inflicting injuries on innocent and armed civilians and causing wanton carnage. Why are they doing this? Is it a direction or a directive from a president, a despotic president? Why are the police then changing their roles from what they need to do to what they're doing? And another thing is, yes, if then that's the case that the whole world is despotic, why are they then pointing fingers to say that some African countries are despots, or where the dictatorship exists and despotism exists? Is that then unfair to us as our people? What do you think about that, Window?
That is what the West usually do. To refract and detract attention from their wrongdoing, they steer things differently in Africa. They create instability in Africa, and then it appears as if Africa is the most corrupt, is the most unstable, but then this instability has been instigated and orchestrated by the West. So that's why they say think something every day and people will start to believe that's the truth. That's why they would sing every day, Africa is corrupt, Africa is uneducated, Africa is backwards, Africa is uncivilized, African leaders are dictators, they are not democratic, even though they are they are elected. If you remember the case of George W. Bush and Al Gore, the rerun of the elections to count took some days, unusually. So a pot was being cooked to make things appear genuine, whereas the pot was being cooked. So that's what they do. It's a trick in the textbook, make Africa appear what they want it to appear, and us Africans will be the first to jump and agree with them. Thank you.
It's very interesting.
I totally agree with you, my brother. But I would like to say, whilst we know that the West has a certain stance and would like to see Africa as being chaotic so that they can take advantage, but I also think that our leaders lack the backbone to stand up to these guys and say no, like what Traore has done. Because on the one hand, what Traore has done has meant that he is a type of dictator who is for the people, whereas the others are dictators who are marching to a foreign tune. And that's what I think we need to pay attention to. Whose drum is this dictator marching to? Because in a lot of instances, for example, in much of Africa, including my country, the colonialists were there to exploit. And now we're in the neo-colonial phase, and we are actually taking the resources there ourselves. And it is that which makes it even more painful, that these guys are dictators who are exploiting their own people. And they're so short-sighted because they're stashing away Africa's wealth, a country's wealth in Switzerland for the benefit of their children. But in the broad scheme of things, they're actually propping those very institutions, countries that they fought against. And it doesn't make sense. So for Africa to move from where it is today.
Brother Pigeon.
Yes,
Sister Tapua.
Yes.
Uh, you see, the problem, you say the problem is with our leaders who do not have a backbone.
Mm-hmm.
Our leaders come to power with the blessing of the West all the time. So how would they want to have a backbone and stand up against their installers? And Brother Kwame gets
Yes,
angry. Brother Kwame gets angry when we say we were given independence. And he contends that, no, we fought for it and this and that. Most independence were brought about with the sanctions of the UN, like Namibia, for instance. So who's the UN? It's the same West. So we were given independence. The case of Namibia in point, to the extent that our constitution was predetermined in 1982 for 1990. Anything outside that framework, Namibian independence wouldn't have been possible. So all leaders in Africa, most specific and sanctions of the West. So they will never stand up against the West, unlike Traore, who seized power by himself. That's why he appears different. And the West is not sitting around on their roller coasters and doing nothing. They are trying to design a mechanism that will soften him or eliminate him altogether. Thank you.
Very interesting insight to lead. So the question is the police. And I think in our Thursday class, there was an issue that was raised on this police issue. Why police force? If you can remember, there was issue of why police force. And we said that it's there to restore social order. What do you think about that in this context, Sawino? What we are reading on Thursday on the police.
You see, every word has got a meaning. Field force, that's to force what? And which field is to be forced? Is the field that surrounds the president that must be forced to the president. Why force if it doesn't have a meaning? So it's a state apparatus that will wield coercion by all means in order to direct the society in a very specific direction, but not to maintain law and order. Maintain law and order is the most preferred way. But if push comes to shove, what must be done? They must be forced to toe the line of the desire of the president of state. So that's why it's a force to reckon with for that matter. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you lost Mr. Tapua because of, I think, network issues. Now, there's this element about the media. What do you think about it? This content about control of the media.
Is it for Sister Tapua?
Sister Tapua is
to
gone.
Control the media. Yeah. To control the media is like every media in every country has got an act that it is run according. Kenya Broadcasting Corporation Act, Namibia Broadcasting Corporation Act, and as you know, media, all print media belongs to either CNN or somewhere in America, or is a sister something of BBC, which we do not know. And editors of all newspapers are controlled by the West. No African, pure African Pan-African media house has survived. It is a gimmick that this one is purely African and it has survived the test of time. Never. All medias are controlled somewhere by the CIA, the Mossad, M16, and these guys. They will never allow you to fit, like the riot that was, the uprising that was in Kenya. It was not reported in the mainstream media. One could only see it on TikTok, WhatsApp, and blah, 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 because it shouldn't be there. So we don't have media at all. And if you open your own media house, it will go down on its knees within the first 5 years of its inception.
But I
So
have
let
a
them
different
not tell
thinking on this.
you.
You see,
Yes,
of
thank
course,
you.
media freedom is also based on other things. But you remember we read initially that it's a free media that will then enable us to defeat the dictator. Hmm? Media that will report things as they're supposed to be. Media that will actually give the reality and the context of the ground. But as you're saying, there's an element of control by the West in as far as who fund the media. I remember, like recently in Kenya, this protest, of course, there's one of the Kenyan who is working with CNN. It's called Arimado. We always fly in the country to recover some of these events directly. And in fact, there are sometimes CNN was covering it live or Al Jazeera. Now, Kenyan media are also covering what was going on in the street live, which means if the police is beating a citizen, it's live on the TV. Then the Media Council Center noticed that all media stations should stop live coverage. Of course, that came in, media protested. One of the media stations protested. They continued their live coverage, but the government went to their system and actually switched off their live coverage. People moved to court immediately within the same day, and the court reinstated their live coverage at media houses. Yes, I think situations are different, but also in many countries that's the reality. The media is alone apparatus for what government thinks about. What do you think about that? That's a window.
The media and the West always has got a plan B and a plan C before you think about it. Like the first time in Kenya last year, when the uprising started, I still contend that the West has initiated it. That's why it has started so strong, and Ruto was just 2 minutes away from resigning. Only from the West to realize that Ruto will go, and then who will be next, which will be better than Ruto. And Ruto, before the uprising, he made some utterances that sounded Pan-African. And that's when the West wanted to show him a lesson to say, if you think you have grown, we will prove it to you that you haven't grown. And that's why in the middle of the uprising, the West came again and quelled the uprising for Ruto to survive and to realize that you will do what we are telling you to do. And now the Gen Zs think they have got the same Vuma with which they have started. I can be 100% wrong, but that's my observation. So the media, when they want to install another dictator, they will let the news flow in the media until the dictator is dethroned, this first one, and the second one is installed, and then it will go back to square one. Only screen news will appear where? Thank you.
Thank you. I might not be in total agreement with your narration on what happened in June 24th last year on West getting in touch, because basically one of the things that key issues that even made people be very angry is that when the government was drafting the budget, which I think it happens in every country, the West was seated in the finance bill in the parliament. But the representatives from EU and the ambassadors were in parliament, seated there, waiting to pass our bill in our parliament. So that element of the West being in the parliament and trying to pass the bill made even the citizens say that this is not Kenyan finance bill, this is IMF and the West finance bill. And that made people to be more angry. But yes, it's very possible if you have a strong media, you can have a strong society. In societies where media are not strong, because media is what informs the people. And media can be controlled by the despots, as we are being told here, control the narrative to hide the atrocity the government commit and to try to praise government where the government is not doing anything. Yeah, that's also very critical in this particular aspect. Thank you. I don't know if you
And
want
the
to
narrative and the narrative of the despot is remotely controlled by the West. Before the despot implements it, they agree this is what you are going to do, or he is dictated to. This is what you are going to do, and this is the strategy. Everything designed, finished, just to be implemented. Because if you leave room for that individual to design the strategy, it's going to have a lot of flaws and it's going to flop. So it first went through trial and error, and then it was given to the despot, and the despot must just implement it, because all the apparatus that must implement it are under his control and watch.
I think that's
Thank
very
you.
important, because you are raising another important. When one of the interview was done later by one of the former, I think, treasury officer, he actually admitted that even during the regime that Kenyans thought was a good regime, during Kibaki regime, that the process of budget making, before even that budget is taken to the parliament, the West must read the budget, approve the budget, and be in order with that budget. Is when that budget can be taken in parliament, and is when that budget can be discussed, and is when that budget can be approved. And you wonder, really, what is that? And all these things we don't know until maybe somebody comes in media and interviewed, and then you get to know, oh, what's this? And that's what I'm telling you, the June 25th last year, it was now very disrespectful. Now even the ambassadors sat in our parliament during the reading of the finance bill, waiting to see if their paper is going to pass through, so that when it passed through, and you wonder why our governments of Africa are always in debt. Because how can the West, if they are technocrats in terms of economics, how can they be supporting this budget in these countries that are having a trillion deficit budget, a trillion deficit debt, a trillion deficit debt? What is their interest in those debts, in those deficits? Because you realize at the end of the day, you get a budget that has never been budget that is equivalent to revenue collected. There's always debt, 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 debt. Then you see how they align their priorities in terms of development. So I think media still play a good role. In Kenya, media has actually helped us, and not only mainstream media, social media. If there was no media, none of you could have known what protest is going on in Kenya. Go to social media. None of you could have been aware what was going on in this country. And there are a lot of such things. No, both mainstream. In Kenya, for example, even mainstream are very active. And it's because, some of you might not be tuning to mainstream channels in your country in Kenya. You might not be tuning to Citizen, you might not be tuning to NTV, you might not be tuning to KTN in Kenya, but at least you can have access to what you call now the social media that does not have boundary. But even in Kenya, the mainstream media have worked several times to at least show what the government does. And if you look at the headlines of our media, especially print media, one or two print media, I'll share some of the headlines before even we end this. You see how it's very thorough, and people say, why is the media fighting the government? Because there's always seem to be fighting the government. Well, that is not free everywhere. In some countries, even the journalists do not have that fight to even do coverage. Some are being killed, intimidated. So I think these reasons given here why the dictator want to control the media is also very valid to this conversation. But I don't know what you think. You can come in and share your thoughts on this as well.
Brother Pigeon, mainstream media is captured, no question about it. Social media is captured as well. Why does TikTok belong to Elon Musk? Why does who belong to what? Why does what media belongs to who? All these medias, the social media platforms, they are not public platforms. They belong to specific individuals. Just like the mainstream media belongs to certain individuals, just like the banks, central bank does not belong to any country. It belongs to America somewhere. So this social media, and remember, the West and China and Russia, they don't plan for 10 years and 5 years and 15 years. They have got 100 years plan. So for now, the social media appears to be independent and free, but they will start capping it step by step, way by way, in such a subtle way that you do not see until 10 years from now. In order for you to access social media, you are supposed to have been chipped somewhere, and the social media will allow you once they read that chip in your body.
If I can come in, just to point out that any despot has to give a semblance of being inclusive and fair. So once they're pressed, they give in a bit, but just enough for them to survive. So what we have is a situation where protests happen, they have to give in a bit, and as soon as they're able, sometimes they're able to revert back to their original position. In terms of the media, we've got examples of genuinely free, independent journalists trying to put across their ideas, but they're soon curbed. They're curbed not because they're not telling the truth, but they're supposed to be saying someone else's truth. Because truth is dependent on where you're standing. And I'm so concerned about people perceiving the internet and social media as being independent and free. We've seen how algorithms are used to push to Africans anything that's fun, that's jocular, nothing educative, music and dance. You suddenly get all these things. You never have meaningful conversation directed at you.
Kasongo.
Anything, I know, anything that is trying to advocate for Black Africa, you don't get. And then the worst for me was, I think I passed it in one of the groups, where China has now come up with a way of circumventing what WhatsApp does in terms of encryption. They're now able to kind of see who's saying what. And that's bad. That's absolutely bad for free speech and for just us being able to say what we want to say. And particularly because it can be used against certain groups of people. If it were just being used against an individual, you can always have 1,000 other individuals saying the same. But once we start having Africans or anything of a particular theme that does not align with their position being censored. Look at what Donald Trump tried to do with Twitter. It didn't work. People protested, but it doesn't mean they've given up. They're still trying, and they'll try something else that's subtle or subtler. So it's a tricky situation, which is why someone was saying, as Africans, we must try and have our own. Yes, we must try and have our own. Anyway, I'll stop there.
We can try and have our own, but where is it going to be hosted? On whose cloud? Do we have satellites there somewhere there where we can host our things, or will we still rely on a Netflix? What is this thing of Elon Musk? That's the problem. We don't have, Africa does not have satellite up in the sky, do we?
No, we can have our own.
When?
No, it doesn't mean we can't have. When we set our minds to it, we will have.
Yeah, after 20 years. Yes.
Mm.
Oh, Sawino, who assured you that it's after 20 years? It can be after 100 years. Why did you say 20?
Oh, okay. 700 years.
You see, basically,
I'm trying to be
Yes.
optimistic.
no, basically, you see whatever Burkina Faso, whatever
The thing
Burkina
is,
Faso.
we're not fighting for something that's going to happen in our lifetime. You were saying China plans for 100 years. Why don't we as Africans plan for 100 years? Things.
No, you see, Sister Tapua, whatever might have not happened in the lifetime of
I
people of
don't think we
Burkina
should be stopped from doing that. We should actually be planning for 100 years, for 200 years.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
No, you see, whatever the Burkina
Yes,
Faso,
I
for
can.
example, Burkina Faso, for example, was one of the poorest countries in Africa. Now, the people of that country did not even believe some of the things they would see in their lifetime. They never even believed that. The people even never believed that they could see a common currency that is not French currency in Western Africa. They could not believe that. But if they were to have a conversation, they'll tell you maybe not in my lifetime. The people could believe that they can actually even change the so-called what the judges put on their head, those colonial wigs, and have a traditional wigs. Even the judges couldn't think that there's a day that such thing will come in their lifetime. Look even about the uniforms of the students in the school. Look even around banning some of the languages. Look even around what the Israel is trying to do today. I'm telling you, ordinary people from Sahel did never even believe that they could see that in their lifetime. And therefore,
absolutely,
saying that it can happen in another lifetime, if you don't even prepare for that lifetime, it means it will never happen. Because if you say that it can happen in 20 years or 30 years, what are we prepared to ensure that it will happen in 30 years or 20 years? And that is the same thing I've been questioning every day. If we say that Africa will unite in 2063, who tells you it will unite? What have we put in place to show you that it will actually unite in that 2063? It has failed to unite all those period of time. You see? And another thing you ask yourself, now, why does it have to take those 2063? With proper leadership, for example, you see countries are removing visas. Countries are revoking some currencies. Whatever we need, and I think that's why we need to go to the extra man that despots and puppets of the West, as long as they continue to exist, we may never achieve what we want. But if we can get progressive leaders, and time has shown that they have not waited in 2063. Sankara came in Burkina Faso in 1980s. He didn't have to wait until 2022. There was a Sankara before. And progressive leaders are born. They're available in the continent, they're working. But the consciousness of the masses, and that's why you realize that most of the time, even those so-called progressive leaders do not become leaders through what you call the democratic ballot system. Because even the consciousness of the masses is still not also worked on. So we think that we can have a progressive leader to be in office. But who elects a progressive leader in office? It's a progressive citizen. So if the consciousness of the citizen is also not in tandem with what they expect, as much as the West will interfere, but there's a bigger possibility that we might have not. And I've asked people, do you think if Traore was to contest for a normal election before he did the coup, do you think Burkina Faso people could have elected him? Before he came in, leave alone the coup, before he came in coup, if he was to present himself in the democratic election, do you think they could have elected him? Even a member of just a local area, they couldn't. They couldn't elect him. But once this person gets in and starts working on everything else, the masses are up there. So does it mean that the mind of the masses changed overnight? And if it changed overnight, then it tells you that the masses of Africa's mind can change anytime. It doesn't have to wait for 100 years, 50 years, or 60 years. But these are things that we must be very clear that we must try to liberate our countries. Of course, democratic elections are being put in place, for example. But as we are saying, there are some of the cosmetics. to ensure that Africa is participating in what you call democratic practices. For example, somebody asked,
democratic elections are there to produce what? What type of leader? Is it to produce a democratic leader?
No, but the question is, are they even democratic in the first place before we call them democratic
That's
elections?
what I'm asking.
Now you see,
we don't want democratically elected leaders, full stop. That's not what we want.
No, the question
we want progressive, democratically elected leaders. And these progressive leaders must be voted by the progressive-minded people. And the progressive-minded people are what percentage of the population? 2%. How are they going to win?
Now, that is the key question you're bringing into this context as well. So, for example, let's take a case study of Senegal, where we have the two young men who were elected through the election. That was democratic. We can call it democratic election, for example, where we have Sonko and the other young man. They are trying to move to a direction that is appearing to be very progressive so far, if we can say that. We have presidents that either came through democratic process and have made progressive proclamations. You see? For example, I will not treat either moving to BRICS as being progressive. But the leaders who have stood and said that we are moving to BRICS and we are stopping those West nonsense, and they're moving. There are people who look, for example, what President of Ghana was trying to say, that yes, we are going to join Sahel. It was not coming through a progressive move, but they want to go. It's I think the progressive or positive mentality is what is lacking in African leadership. There are so many people who are not progressive at all. They are not, in the group of presidents of Africa, they are all puppets. So they are very comfortable in their sittings of puppets. But the moment new vibrations start getting in, some few start saying, oh, let's move to that vibration. Look at what now people are saying they want to move to Sahel. So many of them, some even were elected by those so-called democratic ways. But they're saying, let's move to that direction. So there is I think, an element, as much as there are few progressive citizens in a country, but there are some turning points when citizens make change. And there are people who have won elections in some countries in Africa who are not even expected to win those elections. If you say per se how it was, we can say it's by the design of the West that they wanted to capture the next person. But I believe that what stops us from what we want to achieve is the leadership. It's not the time. It's not a matter of how long it has to take. It's about the leadership. Because with the leadership and right leadership, we're not puppets. It doesn't have to wait for 2063 for Africa to unite. But the question is, if Traore was to sit in that table with AU leaders, it will be Traore and his friends, some four of them, voting for Africa to unite against 50 puppets who will never vote for it. And that's the same way they dropped down the Nkrumah's agenda in 1963 about Africa uniting, and Julius Carrere, Nyerere did their own thing. So there's a repetition of this behavior that is even going to occur again and again. And the question is, how do we stop it?
Thank you. I think sorry. It's okay. Go ahead, my brother.
No. Go ahead, Senator Paul.
Okay. No, I wanted to say, I've observed that even the puppet leaders know the direction the wind is blowing. I mean, look at, for example, the young Botswana president who stood up to praise Traore. He was democratically elected. But before his election, he was not as assertive as he is now, and not as confident as he is now in terms of what he wants to do for Africa, and knowing that standing as a person, as his own person, is actually better than not. And I've discovered that there are quite a few leaders who are now jumping onto the Traore bandwagon in order to cover up their misdeeds and appear to be progressive. So what we're saying is Africa is waking up. The leaders know which type of leader we want, and they're trying to fashion themselves to be that leader. It's a start, because some of them, it opens up the room for the genuine leaders to come up and the fakers to be seen, because you cannot say without deeds. They have to show the deeds. And if they're not able to show the deeds, then they're in trouble, because even the West will not want to use them, because they're now going to struggle to find puppets, because there won't be any puppets, because the people would have refused puppets. So like what Pigbin was saying, we must continue to harp on, even if we think it might not be 100 years, even if we think it might be whatever, but we need to march to the drum. We need to continuously march to the drum, and people will join in and understand what we're saying. Because today, are we not talking about Kwame Nkrumah and how insightful he was? Yes, in retrospect. But in those congresses that they had, some people were thinking he was mad. So we need to know that whatever we're doing, it will work. It will definitely work, because if we're intentional in what we're doing, then we'll be fine.
Thank you.
For now.
Thanks, Mr. Tapoa. I think this quote by Joseph Stalin is very important, because Joseph Stalin says that control the media and you control the mind of the people. And then it goes ahead to say that a despotic regime may seek to control the flow of information for a variety of reasons. One is to keep the movement off top officials or army commanders or military excesses from being reported, especially in the regimes that perceive a threat of survival. And two, it says that the despot want to control the media, to use the media is a tool for indoctrination to advance a certain political ideology, religion, or personality cult of the leader. And three, they control the media to use the media as a propaganda mouthpiece of the government, passing government or praising government policies and lambasting its critiques. They also use the media to keep the people in the dark. The regime may not want embarrassing lapses in judgment, competence, or governance, such as a waste of state resources, graft, embezzlement, corruption exposed in this media, and also to keep the outside world in the dark regarding the events in the country. So the regime may not want flagrant violation of human rights, brutal repression, government malfeasance exposed to the outside world. A despotic or a despot does not want the world to know of the scars of dissident being cast in such a chamber, or the women being raped in prisons, as it occurred in Iran, 2009, and Guinea, 2009 as well. And lastly is to silence the position, dissidents, and critics of Indian government and policy. So just as you look at that, those reasons why yes.
Despots don't control media. The media is being outsourced to them on specific conditions. Because the media is not theirs. How can they control the media?
You think the media
does William Ruto own a media house?
Yeah, he owns one. It's being said.
One. Okay. Does he own the rest?
He doesn't own the rest, but the rest who own the media stations need the favor from the president.
Yeah, so the media is being outsourced to them by the owners, because they have a specific agenda that they must drive, and they can't drive it without the media.
They use threats. They use
yes. So, and before we tackle that, going a bit back to Botswana, if you have got an ideology that you are following, you must be as crazy as Kwame Nkrumah, and not to be afraid of anything, not to wait until you are in power. And now that you see Traore is the main man, and this is what he's advocating, I don't have a choice. This will be the right horse to ride on, even though I did not plan for it. And remember, that guy from Botswana is almost in a GNU like South Africa. So he has to make himself relevant. And the wind of change now is the way of Traore. That's why he has flipped quickly and decided to be, let me be a Traore of Botswana.
But Fawino, what do you think he's gaining by saying he be Traore of Botswana?
It's the only way that can keep him in power. Otherwise, his own GNU would have given him a rougher
So do you think
they are giving him now.
the GNE is progressive enough to support Traore, or also GNEs might be also acting for survival?
No. I mean the one of Botswana, not the one of South Africa.
Now, even the one of Botswana. If you're saying that the president is acting in a manner that there's a wind where the wind is moving, how many presidents in Africa are seeing that wind and are not acting in that direction? How many? And if you're saying that he's afraid of something that is very positive in the country, for example, do you think that what he's afraid of is that progressive?
The rest of the Africans are not between a rock and a hard place. They are very comfortable. They are sitting on their roller coasters. So they don't need to do anything. They must just be despots par excellence. And that's the end of the story.
Quite interesting. Sister Sapo is laughing. Welcome, brother Ngosa Chanda. Please welcome to this is our usual book review. So we are reading and reviewing the book, Defeating Dictators.
I'm enjoying this because of the roller coaster that the dictators are enjoying their roller coaster.
It's not funny.
Sorry.
We are in a very big fix. That's why every day I say, let's seize power, like Traore. It's the only way that can work.
Sorry.
Let's seize power wherever we are.
Now, Windhoek, if you were to seize power today, will you wish to control the media?
Of course. How will I remain in power if I don't control them?
I think that's where the difference is. We want to control the media to conscientize people.
But Windhoek is saying, how will he remain in power? Listen to Sister Tapua. Windhoek is saying, Sister Tapua,
does want to control the media to remain in power. Is it serving? And to what end?
Sister Tapua, Windhoek is saying, how will he remain in power if he doesn't control the media?
Yes.
But the question again is simple, because I've read for you the headlines of Kenya media, especially the magazine, on how it is reporting about President Ruto. And the question is, do you think President Ruto cannot control those media houses? Because they keep him left, right, and center. Even this story of Sudan.
He could be struggling.
You see how Kenya is involved in Sudan issue. Did you hear that story? When Kenya was exposed on how it is involving Sudan issue.
Yes, I know. Yes. The arms.
That was a direct finger pointed at the president. Direct. And in fact, one of the radical media house that has been accused of this is the media house that is owned by the family of the second president of this country, Moi family. The Moi family owns what we call the Standard Media. And Standard Media is the one that keep on exposing the president. They're all from the same community. In fact, Moi family is a Kalenjin, President Ruto is a Kalenjin. The Moi family are not out there in opposition that strongly. In fact, what Ruto did, and I think maybe it's a revenge, when Moi left power, his son became a senator in this country, and his other son was a member of parliament. Now, when Ruto was seeking power before Moi died, Moi refused to meet him. So Ruto went to meet Moi in home before Moi died, but Moi refused completely. So I think Ruto was a bit biased a bit, and he started a campaign to bring down that family. Now, he ensured that, because it's the same community, you see, what they wanted to pass what they call tribal kingpin. Because Moi was coming from the same tribe or same ethnic community as a former president, and Ruto was seeking a national position as a president from the same community, so probably you hope that Moi would pass the mantle to him. And there was a small stick. It's like we use it, a small stick that was being used by Moi. So what happened is that when Moi died, that stick was not passed, physical stick was not passed to William Ruto. It was handed over from the elder son to the younger son, who was a senator. The younger son then became symbolically as the leader of the community. But then Ruto did organize for elders of his community now, the Talan community, to endorse him as the kingpin of his community. They ensured that those two sons are no longer in politics completely. So he campaigned and all of them were thrown home. They couldn't fight against Ruto being a president in his past. So they all went home. And now that same way family, the media station was facing serious scandal. I think government was pushing scandal to that media family, media house, KRA payment, revenues, and so many things. But that media company now came very strong. And it has been bold enough now to start exporting this scandal without any fear. And that's why other media, print media houses have also started following up. And the momentum is moving. So you see how this also interchanges. Sometimes you may think that those media are progressive, but also maybe they are fighting their personal wars. And in that way, maybe
Yes.
it becomes favorable for us, and therefore, because their personal wars become our benefit, as they say, the enemy of your enemy is your friend, then it ends up serving us good. But it doesn't mean that they might stay in power. For example, if Moi family or the son was to be the president, I don't think that media house could be exposing the government the same way it does today. So that's also another thing we need to look at.
Mm.
Yeah, you can come in, Sister Tapua.
Yes, I'm actually reminded of how who's this the media mogul in America? What's his name? The old man.
Warren
How
Buffett.
his newspapers support the Republic. Yes, support the Republicans, and I mean to the hilt, to the extent that even with Fox News, they were publishing all sorts of misinformation and disinformation and just confusing the population because they wanted to favor a certain candidate. And then when they're caught with their pants down, they try as quickly as possible to turn around. And they struggled in the UK when one of their newspapers, The Sun, went way out in terms of what they were saying and claiming. And then they were caught and taken to court and fined. So what you might need there is a justice system that appears not to be captured, that gives in to being fair at certain points. But what I've noticed is happening in Zimbabwe as well is the journalists take sides. And depending on what tiff they have with the other side, you eventually discover that this journalist that you thought was really progressive was also in the same breath fighting his own battles. And it's very disheartening when you realize that. But I think we need to just ride the wave. Because if it's going in our direction, we'll go in that direction as far as it will take us, and then we'll take the next wave. Because at the moment, we have no control of the media, but someone has. If that person who has seems to be okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just came across a headline of the media standard, this print media today, which is very interesting that I wanted to chip in as you and then continue the conversation. Now, recently, the Minister of Internal Security in Kenya, after the protest, gave a shoot to kill order. And funny thing, he does it in public. He tells the police officer to take a shoot to kill order. Now, the headline of the standard that is up tonight or tomorrow morning is already out because the headlines do come out earlier. It says that, no, thank you. You see? No, thank you. The police officers are telling the Minister of Interior that, no, we will not follow your order, but thank you for your advice. And that is the headline of a media newsprint. Where on earth can you hear that? It's very hard. Most of the time they don't project it. You see? But as you say, yes, there might be internal wars that are fought between these media stations, but it serves our interest. So sometimes we must be thankful. But also, countries like, for example, Kenya, have played some critical step in the media freedom. I know there are other countries that media freedom is still an issue. No countries like, for example, Uganda, even media coverage might be very hard. But in some countries like Kenya, they have gone a long way to struggle for media space and media freedom. Even if you harass a media personality, it will be an issue. But you see, the despots want to hold the media. And as I repeat again what Stalin said, is that control the media and you control the mind of the people. But again, For example, in Kenya, the media in Kenya, especially the print media, has been full of politics. I don't know in your country if that's the case, but in my country, even the mainstream media, amount of time we take for politics is almost 80%. 80% of news is politics. 80% of program is politics. 80% of a newspaper is politics. Really, where is the innovation? Where is the agriculture? Where is the technology? Where is the industrialization? Consumers of politics and politics and politics. That is similar. So media can just be a game and a tool to convert the society and make the society be very asleep. I don't know what you think about that. Welcome, Brother
Brother
Coco, to our
Pigeon,
conversation. Yes. Yes, Awindok, go ahead.
nothing happens by chance. Nothing happens by chance. Everything happens by design. So whatever the media says today, there was a caucus about it. There was a caucus after the protest, and a line of thinking was projected in order to achieve a specific objective. That objective you do not know is only known to the designer. They will not leak anything in the media that is not in their interest in the long run. Let it sound sweet today. They say giving somebody a sweet on a stick, giving somebody a long rope to hang himself with. These are all tactics in the textbook. So I don't really believe in media freedom. I don't believe in media independence, because media belong to people and they have got a pen against your purpose, like it or not. Thank you.
Sister Tapa,
Yes,
what do you say
I
about
agree
media?
with you. Yeah, I agree, because it wouldn't make
Sorry,
sense.
Sister Tapua. Sorry,
It's all right.
Sister Tapua. Sister Tapua, just a minute. You see,
Yes.
you have got people like the media ombudsman and the media this and the media what. All these people did not fall from heaven like manna. They were appointed with the blessing of the despot. You see, there is a media commission that will screen people and then it must be endorsed by the president. There is this whatever something with the recommendation of the president, with the endorsement of the president. So it's never independent. So while these people are screening this guy, there's already a word on the table that Sister Tapua, by hook or crook, should get that. Do you think if somebody was recommended, that would not be in the interest of the despot, the despot will like endorse him? Never. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. But my point was, is it possible or even feasible to have an independent media? Because if we say in any society, we have different perspectives, and we have the dialectics that goes on within any society. I mean, the media would be manic. It would be madness, because they'd just be reporting without any thematic or organized perspective in how they see things. So fundamentally, for any media house to work, they must have a position. And then they go out to get the news that supports that position. If they find the news changing, it might influence their perspective to change it. But you cannot have an independent media. So the struggle is politicians trying to control the media, which is also difficult in itself, especially in these days where we have AI. Because even AI, which is it's using the majority of the information that it takes in its sphere. And in that instance, what you find is a situation where what people are fed is what the majority of the people who contribute to AI have said. And that in itself is prejudice, especially if, for example, an African perspective is not incorporated. I mean, for example, each time I've been in Europe, especially my hometown when I'm in the UK, you cannot go to the local airport without being randomly selected by one of these algorithms that says you must be searched. Because the people who designed this particular whatever did not work with African features. And therefore, when you appear on its system, it says you're an oddball and you have to be searched. And we were saying, we need to record the number of times that we've been stopped and searched by this machine, because it doesn't stop or search anyone else but people of our color. So you cannot design something that is neutral. It doesn't work. The designer, like Sewindbuku is saying, has a stamp on everything that they do. So we have to be mindful that whilst we're riding the wave of whoever is for us at that particular point, we don't need to commit with them. We just need to enjoy the ride. If it's time to move on to the next person who's taking us where we're going, let's do so. I'll end there.
Thank you, Sister Tapua. But me, I have an issue. I remember recently we hosted a session on Soweto uprising. I think you were there.
Yes, I was.
Do you know there were songs that we played during the Soweto uprising? So many songs. Now, when I uploaded that video on YouTube, do you know what happened? YouTube flagged off all those music. In fact,
sorry?
YouTube flagged off the music. The whole video recording was flagged off. In fact, what happened is that they never heard the content of what you were discussing. Only thing they told me, they had issues with the music we were playing. No, you wonder, how free is that free? Maybe, you see? Because they control that. They pretend that they give us some level of what you call some level of freedom, but in reality, there's no freedom they give to us.
No.
These are songs played by Africans. I don't know if I will share what they're songs played by Africans, but you're stopping me from playing them. You're saying they're not allowed to be played in some other region because they contain some other spirit or I don't know, some other message or what. And these were revolutionary songs to remember in the Soweto uprising. Soweto uprising is a genocide that was committed on our people. But you don't want us to have it.
And they let us listen to Kasongo.
No, they'll allow us to listen to Kasongo. They will. But when it comes to Soweto uprising and the songs on Soweto uprising, they don't want us to listen to that. But even beyond that, one thing that people also must be very conscious on is that no media cannot be controlled. Because today, we have space to talk about X because of Elon Musk says it's free. But do you think if tomorrow Elon Musk might have some interest in Kenya, he might have some interest in Kenya, and the president of Kenya says that for you to get your interest here, you must close that your Twitter for Kenya. You know, he will close it. He will close it. Now, if today, and that's one thing we need, when you are raising the issue of independence, and not even independence, because I don't think there's anything that can be independent. It must be serving the interests of some people. It can never be neutral. Now, we the Pan-Africans must start creating our own media spaces and outlets. And the second thing that Sawindok was raising is very important. Do we have the hosting rights? Where are the servers on the cloud? I'm told sometimes back there was an internet issue in Kenya here. But do you know what we were told? That they were fixing the cables beneath the Indian Ocean. And those cables have come from US. Really? Really? So the whole continent cannot provide this safe internet. They have to have cables from US. That's total nonsense. You see? So if US decides today to close the internet, it means all of Africa will not be online. That's where we are. If the US today decide to close their Zoom, it means we no longer meet. And do you think that their media platforms, for example, their Zooms and the rest that they have, do you think it's genuinely 100% to serve our interest? Do you believe that's what it serves, our interest? As much as they make money out of it, as much as they make money out of it, do you think that they're too much thinking about us to an extent that they can help us have a platform to serve our interest? No. No. So it's very important. And if you even look at what Nkrumah was doing with George Padmore during the Ghana time, they decided to write their own article. I think it was Africa Rising or something like that, so that they could tell their story in their own way. And even when they're telling their story in their own way, they had an agenda with that story so that they can propel their ideology and their message. So if we don't have what we can own to sell our story in our own way, don't expect anybody's media to tell your story in your own way. No, unless it's for their interest. If there's no any of their interest, there's nothing they'll do about it. So these are all the things we must be awake to. And of course, I said that the dictators use them. Yeah, dictators can use that at their discretion, because if the dictator is the president, then every businessman is after his own profit. So no businessman will like to go against the president. So they'll abide by it. But that's the presidential decree. That's what I'm thinking.
Absolutely. What comes to mind for me is how to overcome the problem of being censored. I've seen videos that use popular Western celebrities, music in the background, but the message is spoken in an indigenous language. And you say, oh, for me, it looked very old to start with, because you've got this kind of music that doesn't quite go with the message that's being delivered. But because you're able to focus on the message because of the language that's being used, you kind of get the message. So from what's that saying to me is we have to find a way of working with the system to our advantage, because they cannot control everything. And it brings us back to the languages that we use to communicate. Because, for example, with the Chinese, who
Is that a war?
want to be communicated
Mr. Tapua, I can't hear you. Sorry, Mr. Tapua, I have to mute
But
you.
we shouldn't get discouraged because we're all speaking 1,000 languages.
Sister Tapua, start hiding. They are after you. They are coming after you.
now, leave what Mr. Tapua is struggling with. Can you see the claim that I got from their channel? What did they say about fire in Soweto? But this claim does not restrict your video. The second one, they said the DA Nacionale, that this video cannot be seen in some territories. Look at that.
Yeah. Sister Tapua. Sister Tapua. Hey. I hope she's
Yes,
not
I
in
can
trouble.
hear you. I can hear you.
Start running, sister. They are coming after you.
Why? I missed that. I was breaking off.
Yeah, because they are already in there censoring you. That's why it's breaking.
Are they? Oh no. No.
Comrade, I think we've been having an interesting conversation here on two elements of dictatorship. We might be going on licensing later, but one, we've been looking at the police, how the dictators control the army, the military, and it's very clear that facilitate the dispensation of patronage and to this any threat to their power. The despot usurps control of key institutions, which is the army, the police, the civil service, the state, media, parliament, judiciary, central bank, and education system. We must know that even the education system is for despotic control. The central bank is also an element of things that can be controlled by the despot. The parliament, the judiciary, the media, the civil society and civil service, and army and the police. And in some countries, you've seen this is really going on, and that's what's in the press. So that's what goes on. And also, we now look at the element of the media. So today, we are focusing on those two and how the dictators also and despots control the media for their own purpose. Next class, we'll be looking at now at licensing and censorship. So how they censor the radio stations, the TV stations, how they withdraw their licenses, how they do issues with dismissal, they arrest people, they detain people. Another thing we'll be looking at is also how they murder and how we have forced disappearance of the citizens, even how they do criminal defamation and all these things. These are just ways we are learning about the despotic regime. And thank you very much for your attendance today. Maybe final remarks from all of us, from Sawindok, Sister Tapua, any of your final remarks on this text so far today.
The education system must be completely under control. The curriculum must be designed in such a fashion that people are also kept in the dark, just like the media is keeping you in the dark. You are only allowed to know how many eyes a grasshopper has. You are only allowed to know how strong and how high a frog can jump. And that's enough for you to be an academic. So they won't teach you what you, Brother Pigeon, is teaching you now. How to identify a despot, how to fight a despot, how to put mechanisms in place that will fight a despot. They won't teach you philosophy and ideology because these things will open your eyes. Philosophy is just an introductory course in your political studies, and that's enough for you. What more do you want to know? Thank you.
I like how you're ending it. Sister Tapua.
For me, I want us to end this session with hope. Because whilst the situation might look very bleak in terms of how the despot controls everything and they're experts at it and they've been doing it for a long time. But if we look at the history and if we look at the history of struggles, these too shall end. There is nothing that goes on forever. It's a dance that we're engaged in. And we need to continue because we cannot give up. So for me, a luta continua, the struggle continues. Thank you.
A luta continua indeed. Thank you very much for your inputs and your contribution today. Yes, as you said, we are still learning the modes of dictators, how to know a dictator, and based on the characteristics described here, as Sawindok said, then the world is full of only dictators. So probably that's also very important. Oh, Brother Coco, now you can be able to speak. Please come in, Brother Coco.
Thank you, brothers and sisters. It's a pleasure to be with you here tonight. Apologies, I have not been able to make this session as I have another session on initiation with teacher Mitri clashing. So that's more of Afrocentric education from Kemet. What I am reading from the page that you shared, Brother Pigden, is just a small section of manufacturing consent. So Professor Noam Chomsky and his friend Bernard, can't remember Bernard's first name, they wrote that book, I think in the 80s, looking at what the master of propaganda in the United States had said about manufacturing consent. So let me just summarize to say the rulers under democracy, they manufacture consent from us as the electorate. They only come back to us in 4 yearly terms or 5 yearly terms to come and make us vote. And then after that, they go ahead and do whatever they want to do. They go ahead and promulgate laws which are not supported by us, but are supported by the rich and powerful. And propaganda is one of the tools that they use a lot. The reason I refer to manufacturing consent here, and again, praise Noam Chomsky, is because it's not that I don't have faith in the Dr. Aite. Dr. Aite has a wealth of information from Dr. Nkrumah. He came from Ghana and he should have had access to Dr. Nkrumah and understood what Dr. Nkrumah was doing or what he was saying or what he was talking about. But Dr. Aite is so steeped in the Western way of thinking and the democratic way of thinking, not realizing what I've just said about manufacturing consent. With manufacturing consent in place, there's no democracy, my brothers and sisters. It doesn't work. It's just a battle of oligarchies. Who is the most powerful? Who has the most powerful media rights? All right. Hence why he set up the Africa Broadcasting, Africa Bureau of Africa with George Patmore in the 50s or 60s, late 50s to 60s. He knew that the BBC was the mouthpiece of the British and the Voice of America was the mouthpiece of the Americans. And RFC was the mouthpiece of the French. Look at what Aite says there. He says the Western people, they take for granted the freedoms they have in their countries. We don't have any freedoms. We don't. It's a lie. Either he hasn't lived in the West or doesn't understand how the Western model works. Because let's look at when they attacked Iraq, weapons of mass destruction. When they attacked Vietnam and Korea, communism. When they attacked Afghanistan, terrorism. So we are the West people in this case who are under a lot of oppression from propaganda. Under that model of manufacturing consent, my brothers and sisters. So what he's just talking about is just a minuscule in the scale of things. And we need to read what he says, but we need to understand, put it in a perspective of greater things happening. And this is how it works. It's a class struggle. And that class struggle happens everywhere where we are. But in Africa, it's worse in that. It's a puppetry that was left by colonialism. They are still continuing to do what the colonial masters wanted them to do at our expense. At our expense. We really have to consider how we can take back control as the people. And by taking control, I don't mean just the media, I mean economic. We need to talk about cooperatives. How many times should I raise cooperatives? We need to own our means of production and we need to produce what we consume. If we don't do that, then we are just, it's a pipe dream what we are saying. The African unity is going to happen, but we're going to continue consuming what they produce in the West. We need self-reliance. we need to understand how all of this contribute towards us liberating ourselves. So let me stop there and thank you for your time. I can see it's late now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brother Coco. And indeed, we will stop it there and continue from next week, having been here for some almost 2 hours now. And yeah, thank you for also the point you are raising. Indeed, that is very important also to read the psychology of the writer alongside the thoughts that is putting in place as well. So thank you, Brother Chuka. We are actually coming to an end of this.
One thing that I wrote in the chat. No, I was just saying, I wrote a question in the chat. Maybe we should go away thinking about Donald Trump and the Voice of America, him canceling that Voice of America around the world. What's happening there? Anyway, for another meeting.
Yeah, thank you for raising that. So let's talk about that as well for the next meeting. But for now, thank you very much for your time, and let's meet again next week.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Good night.